Benjamin Franklin wrote this: "When I was a child, at 7 years old, my friends on holiday filled my pockets with copper. I went directly to the shop where they sold toys for children, and being charmed with the sound of a whistle I met by the way in the hands of another boy, I voluntarily offered my money for one whistle, all my coppers in my pocket for one whistle. I then came home and blowing that whistle over the house." Can you imagine a little boy with the whistle? Man, that's the worst nightmare we've ever had. Little boy who spent all his money on a whistle, and he goes through the house blowing it to the very much disappointment of his family. His sister didn't like it. His brothers didn't like it. His parents didn't like it. Nobody liked it. His cousins didn't like it. And understanding the bargain that he made, they told him, "Listen, young Benjamin, you gave 4 times the amount of that whistle. That whistle's not worth what you paid for that whistle." And all the joy that he had in his heart by the bargain that he made had now come to disappointment. He said this put me in mind what good things I might have bought with the rest of my money. And they laughed at me so much for my folly that I cried with vexation, and the reflection gave me more chagrin than the whistle gave me pleasure. He said, all the pleasure I had once had with this whistle now gave me grief, because I understood that I gave all my coppers for one little whistle that I could have had so much left over. This, however," he goes on to say, "this, however, was afterwards of use to me, the impression continuing on my mind so often, when I was tempted to buy some unnecessary thing, I said to myself, 'Don't give too much for the whistle,' and I saved the money. As I grew up, came into the world and observed the actions of men, I thought I met with many, very many, who gave too much for the whistle. When I saw anyone too ambitious of court favors, sacrificing his time and attendance on leaves, his repose, his liberty, his virtue, and perhaps his friends to achieve it, I said to myself, 'This man gives too much for the whistle.' When I saw another fond of popularity, constantly employing himself in political bustle, neglecting his own affairs to the ruin of his own family, I says, 'Indeed, this man pays too much for the whistle.' If I knew a miser who gave every kind of comfort of living up, all the pleasures of doing good to others, all esteem for his fellow citizens, and the joy of the benevolent friendship of others for the sake of accumulating wealth, poor man, says I, he gives too much for the whistle. When I meet a man of pleasure, sacrificing every laudable improvement of the mind or of his fortune to more corporal sensations, mistaken man, says I, he gives too much for the whistle. If I see one fond of clothing, fine furniture, fine equipage, all of his fortune, for which he contracts debts, and ends his career in prison, alas, says I, he has paid very dear for his whistle. When I see a beautiful, sweet-tempered girl married to an ill-tempered brute of a husband, what a pity, says I think she gives too much for the whistle."